All right. So at the top, I just wanted to quickly say that while we are excited to be able to have PECTA members here to watch this Meet and Confer event, that this is not an interactive Zoom. I apologize, I did not get the super fancy Zoom. So we are using my just regular Zoom. So if you could please just keep cameras off and audio off. If you are a PECTA member, we would really appreciate it unless you're on the Meet and Confer team. Thank you. So we are returning to the table following the conclusion of last year's Meet and Confer, at which we decided to table an ask for an additional $1,500 to base salaries, pending the influx of money from the state budget. And I think that's it. Did I miss anything? No, okay, we're good.
Okay, and so yeah, so where we had left off was the government board meeting last week. Mr. Quintana delivered a presentation with the latest of what we know in terms of that legislative increase. So I made sure that Mr. Quintana will be here with us today. We can review that presentation if you'd like. We can answer questions. I do have a copy of it pulled up too, if you'd like us to go through it. It would really be whatever you would prefer.
So I was at the governing board meeting, but for the purposes of our members who weren't able to be there or who weren't able to see those numbers, would you mind just maybe doing like a Reader's Digest version of the important key parts?
Yeah, we can do that. Mr. Quintana, you want to take the lead on this? Do you want me to pull anything up?
Yeah, if you want to. If you have the presentation handy, if you want to pull it up, and we'll just kind of go through some of the highlights, and obviously if there's something I missed that people have questions about, we can address those. I do want to also mention that that the presentation was more or less a prelude to the upcoming study session next week, that we'll be covering more updated information on those different topics, and so this information is preliminary based on what I presented back on the 23rd, and we will provide more updated information and more information for that matter at the September 6th study session. But anyway, yeah. So the presentation was basically given an update regarding our average daily attendance and membership that we have here for at least through at that point it was through day 10th or 11th, I believe, of the school year, and also just to provide information regarding a budget update at the same point in time. And if you can go to next one here, just kind of a preview of what we presented was, one, we provide information regarding the average daily membership. We also had some projections, projected budget based on the reduced ADM. As well as just some, comparing to the adopted budget that was approved back in July. And then we also talked about the topics of discussion for the September 6th study session. And one of the things that we informed the board on in the public was that how we were doing related to average daily membership, and basically a trend over the last several years that we had the district, where we've had a reduction in enrollment as a result in lower ADM, over the last several years, and if you look at the bar that's in the blue, that corresponds to this year's estimated ADM, and I say estimated because again it was only the first 10 days of the school year, and that number and that ADM will change as we progress through the year. Either up and down depending how we're doing with attendance and enrollment. And also just we were indicating the impact that the lower ADM has on the budget over the years. And in this particular case, we're comparing last year's budget in 2022 of 53.6 million. And this year we estimated that we would have 54.1 million. partly as a result of the increases from the state budget. So Vic, if you want to go to the next one. And so we're trying to indicate the impact that first of all, the increase in the ADM rates that we're getting from the state, as well as in combination with the lower ADM, we're working on kind of basically predicting what that net result is going to be. At that point in time, we were estimating that we will have a reduction in overall revenues from ADM of $3 million. Based on the fact that our adopted budget was based on an estimated ADM of 4,886, and based on the 10th day attendance, we were estimating about 4,624 ADM, with a reduction in ADM of 262. And again, that was at the time, that was the best figures that we had. And right now we're currently looking at the current trends and attendance ratios and so forth, and to get hopefully a more accurate ADM number that we'll be using to really budget for the rest of the year. And so that information we'll be reviewing next week is going to be both on the revenue projections that we expect to get from the state, as well as the expenses that we're projecting, how that looks. And basically we're going to do a comparison to see if net if we do have an overall increase in our budget, and then also if as a result of whatever that number is, if there is an excess, then we also want to look at making recommendations for compensation increases. So that was kind of the basic information that presented, and then again we really focused at that point more on the discussion this this coming Tuesday, and where a lot more detailed information will be presented, and and also more up-to-date information will be presented.
So Mr. Quintana, thank you so much for that presentation. And just so I understand you, what I think you're saying is that at this point, you're not sure so we do know that there has been a reduction in the ADM, which is the average daily membership, for anyone who isn't quite sure what that is, correct? And that's like our 10-day count and how many students are currently attending our schools, correct?
Correct.
Sorry, I'm asking some questions that maybe I kind of know the answers to, but I want to make sure that I'm clarifying for folks who don't. And then my other question, and this one I actually don't know the answer to, so I'm just making sure that I understood what you said, is that we're not quite sure at this point what the impact of that reduction in ADM is. So at this point, the district is still looking at what that impact will be on our budget. So what you're showing us right now is this like a projection, or are these actual numbers?
No, just projections. Yeah.
Okay, so it is a projection.
Yes.
And so if I heard you correctly, what you're saying is you need further time to look and see if there is money that could be available for things such as compensation. I don't want to say expansions. That is not what I'm trying to say. I'm so sorry. Compensation increases.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, since that the 23rd, we've been basically working every day to prepare for the meeting next Tuesday, where again we want to be real clear about, first of all, the increases that the legislature provided in the budget. We're also looking at the estimates for revenues coming in, again based on the ADM, the average daily membership, and also expenses that we can we're also looking to make sure that if those are as accurate as possible. So that information will be updated and be presented on Tuesday. But yeah, we'll kind of go from initial projections, and then as we look at ADM, for example, every day, basically, we want to see if there's an increase or not. Since then, where the trend is going, and we're also looking at expenses to see if there's opportunities for us to reduce some expenses. And so the combination of those things we've been working on pretty much every day, and it'll be provided on Tuesday.
Thank you so much. And so you might be able then to recommend an increase. Is that
Correct. At
so
that
that is
point,
correct?
right now, depending on the differences between the increased rate that we're getting for ADM, along with the reduction on the ADM, but also looking at expenses to see if there's any room for, decreasing those. And the net effect of that, we're hoping that it's a positive effect where we might have some excess funds that we can use. So if that's the case, then, we do want to make a recommendation to the board of, what kind of raises we could provide.
Awesome. And I was also just wondering, how fluid is the situation?
What part? Because the ADM number, for example, it's all based on attendance, and it's also based on the population of the students. In other words, we get a certain rate for general students. We get different rates for ELL. We get different rates for students with special needs and so forth.
Right.
And so that number is fluid almost every day, and really not until we get to the 100th day
Okay.
do we get a more true number on that, on the ADM. For as an example, we historically, as a district, our enrollment and attendance increases after Labor Day, and sometimes it also increases after the holidays.
Right.
And so so that number is definitely fluid. The part that we're trying to figure out that's maybe not quite as fluid is to see, we know how much we're getting per ADM, so we just got to figure out what is our ADM that we estimate going forward. The expense side is also, we do have some fixed costs that we have already,
Right.
based on just current expenses and openings and open positions. So we also know what those are. So really, I guess the more fluid number, if you will, is going to be the ADM figure.
Okay. And then does our likelihood of seeing an increase like rise and fall over throughout the year, or does it stay relatively the same?
Of ADM or?
So my question is, does the likelihood of an increase to our base salaries rise and fall throughout the year?
Well, I think I think by next week, we should be able to have a good idea, because we are able to predict based on current expenses that we have, and also based on openings that are out there that positions to be filled.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can kind of get that a pretty good number there, which I think we can, that normally holds fairly steady throughout the rest of the year. Once we have that estimate, so we should be able to make that at least a recommendation next week. And the only caveat would be that, let's say, for example, our ADM drops, over the next few months, or increases, substantially. That's where the variable could be, where we might have more opportunity later. But at least at least for now, we'd like to be able to make a recommendation based on what we think is going to be the expected revenue and expected expenses.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So just one more time to clarify, we should have a clearer picture of what might be possible by Tuesday's board meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
That's our goal. That's our goal, is to try to be able to kind of paint a picture of where we're at, where we're going, and how much we have available.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you answering all my questions.
Yeah.
It sounds like then we are sort of at somewhat of an agreement, right? We know that PECTA is asking for the 1,500 additional increase to base to bring us back to proposal number 4 that we met at the table for last year. District, it sounds like, needs a little more time to look at fluctuating numbers and what they might be feasibly and fiscally responsibly able to provide. And then we might be able to come back to the table to see what a base salary increase looks like.
Yeah, that's that's correct.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. In terms of the agreement that we have in place, what you would not see is on the 6th, there is clarity over what's possible And then the next thing you would see is, and here's what's getting recommended to the governing board. We would make sure to meet and confer over that to make sure that we're taking something together to the governing board in terms of a recommendation for an increase.
And I want to just share that I think PECTA, I feel like I almost preface this by saying I don't want to speak for PECTA, but I am the president and I feel like maybe, is that a point of privilege? I don't know. But I think that I speak for all of us, and I'm sure I'll hear it if I don't, that when I say that we would rather do this a little more slowly, but have a more sustainable outcome than to try to rush this and do something that's not beneficial for anybody. So thank you. We really appreciate your continued collaboration throughout this process.
Yeah, appreciate your leadership as well, and just the opportunity to be as transparent as we can and share the best information that we have with everybody in terms of what was extraordinarily wonderful news over the summer that's tempered down a bit as we look at this decrease in ADM. But like Mr. Quintana said, every day for the better part of a few weeks now, we've been working pretty hard to bring as much clarity as we can to the study session on the 6th.
I did have one kind of, I don't know if it's pertinent to this, but it's, I guess, sort of a follow-up question about this funding. So I know we have had a decrease in ADM. However, I know that with this money, there was a heavier weight associated with schools that were experiencing those decreasing enrollment numbers. And then also specific weights were added for school districts that have, for example, like I think it was over 50% free and reduced lunch, which Phoenix L definitely qualified for that. And then we also got heavier weights for students who are in our ESS programs. So did that help at all? Like sort of does that help the situation, or is it just kind of neutral?
No, it does help. And that's the part that we want to clarify also on Tuesday, is that when it comes to the increases that were approved by the legislature, we're trying to break it down by the category that you just mentioned. For example, they are looking at, they actually increased the base level funding by 8.76%. So that's one example. And then, but there's also an increase in weight from for students and with that receive special education services. And also a new one, what they call it, a new basic state aid formula for children with that are eligible for the federal free and reduced program, the lunch program. And yeah, so we're taking all those factors to see how do these increased factors in ADM basically relate to our population that we have of our students. So we're looking at all those things as well, and we're trying to get the best estimates we can based on that information.
Awesome, thank you.
On that note, it would be helpful for me anyway, because I keep getting asked where that 2.9 million number comes from, and I don't know the answer to that. So if you're able to provide us information, I can we can answer the question too, and maybe that would also maybe clarify for us too, is how do we get the same number?
So I can definitely do that, and I'll tell you a little bit of what I know now, and then I'll follow up after this meeting. So we were told from Arizona Education Association and our lobbyists there that the district would be receiving $2.9 million. And then upon further kind of questioning, because over the summer, Dr. Diaz and I had been sort of just in contact about the news. And when he was saying, well, we're not sure we've received it, or we're not quite seeing it yet, I started asking, okay, is it like a lump sum? Is it coming to a specific pot? And to my understanding, it may actually have been spread among more than one pot. So it could be like, I know part of it would have gone to the classroom site fund, and part probably would go to something like M&O, but I will double check on that information for sure and let you know sort of where that might be. So it's not like it would just be like a $2.9 million just sitting in one spot, which would be nice, right? It would make things so much simpler.
Yes, that would be nice. But yeah, if you get that information, that'd be great if you could share it with us.
This way it's like a puzzle. How fun, right?
And then Marnie, you did mention the classroom site fund. I think this is also a good time just to update everybody that the good news there is that we also saw more revenue than we anticipated. We had our Prop 301 meetings. You know, we tried to build like a 4-year sustainability plan, assuming revenue of $2.6 million each year. The revenues that we received this year, it looks like are actually going to be north of $4 million. That would leave about a $1.4 million bubble in the Prop 301 classroom site fund. Really ought to start saying classroom site fund. It's no longer really Prop 301 because it was a new legislative thing. But with that $1.4 million in classroom site fund, I did email all certified staff last week a couple of updates. One was to sign up for the Prop 301 committee. And so for everybody watching this recording who's there who wants to be on the committee, by all means, please reach out. PECTA also will have the 3 seats in the committee that you normally have. We'll look to convene that committee as soon as possible. Aaron and I talked just earlier today about starting to set together some meetings to look at how we could best distribute that excess revenue. So it's another piece of the puzzle, but I think it also fits nicely with the timeline that Mr. Quintana presented today in terms of getting clarity on the legislative increases and then what would be available.
And then Dr. Diaz, can I ask, do you know what accounts for that CSF, that classroom site fund bubble, and where does that money come from?
Yeah, all the money for classroom site fund comes from sales tax revenues. And so the bubble would come from, sadly, inflation. As the price of everything has increased, so too then has the tax on everything. So the state has generated way more sales tax than it could have anticipated 2 years ago. That's that rainy day fund. That thank you to AEA for all of your advocacy at the State House. You all were chiseling into. The same thing then happens not just in the state's general fund, but in the sales tax as well. So that 0.6 of a cent that K-12 education gets, that's where that's coming from. So with that said, we are seeing the economy cool, and it's a great thing for all of us at the pump. But it all may also mean that bubble may not exist in future years. The revenues from classroom site fund, also important to note, are also driven by ADM. The higher your ADM is, the higher your classroom site fund allocation is going to be. So we're making sure to look at the ADM analysis, not just in terms of the M&O budget, but also the classroom site fund budget.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Before we say goodbye and part, I did want to just state that we're all here for the same goal, which is providing our kids with the best possible education that we can. And one thing that I did behind the scenes was I looked at all of the elementary districts that were sort of touching our district. And I did an analysis of starting salaries for classroom teachers. And I found that based on current increases that other districts have given to their teachers, that there are 2 districts that are currently below Phoenix L in terms of starting teacher salary. And those districts are Wilson and Murphy. If I can share my screen, I can show you a little chart that I made.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful. Give me a second to stop sharing mine. There you go.
Awesome. So I looked at Wilson, Murphy, Phoenix, Osborne, Madison, Alhambra, Roosevelt, Isaac, Creighton, and Balls. And here's sort of where we land compared to other districts in the state. And then one of our other members looked at how many classroom teaching positions we have open right now. And you would probably be more of an expert than me, but she counted something like 27. So our goal is really to make sure that as other districts across the state are increasing teacher salary, that we're staying competitive and staying in the towards our same objective of providing our kids with what they need.
Hey, this is super helpful. It's something that we keep an eye on, definitely in HR. If you wouldn't mind sending this to me, I'd be more than happy to take a look. One thing to always recognize when you're comparing salary schedules is every district has a little different in terms of the CSF money and performance pay. There's one district you have in there that puts on their salary schedules if you got max performance pay, but then there's like a note that on the next page that will tell you that you may not get that. And so if you send that my way, I can also do my best to clean that up. I could also make some phone calls over to Baltz and to Creighton to get their full numbers. I know that they're in a similar boat that we are in terms of engaging with their associations as well about increases.
And then on the heels of what Haley said, and I mean this like with all due respect, I'm wondering, is there something that you know that other districts don't? Are we being conservative with this money? And if so, why? And I understand, I don't mean to belabor the point of the ADM because I completely understand that, but is there any other reason that we're being conservative? I know that our district has one of the higher carry forwards of all of the other districts surrounding us. So I was just wondering if there's anything that you are aware of that may not be on our horizons.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I mean, if I think about it's like internally and then like looking over our fence, right? We think internally, one thing that it's the ADM, that we have this very measurable, very demonstrated decline every year in ADM. With that sort of backdrop, it definitely leads us to want to be like you said, just more slow to make sure we can be more sustainable. So I think that's like looking internally, that's one thing for us. Looking over the fence, I think some of the districts that got out with faster increases did not give increases in the spring, or kind of like what's happening here, they gave a partial one and already knew a sort of calculation of what the rest of it would look, so that they're looking to fulfill that that request. Some of the more notable districts that came out earliest too were clear that they're mixing together the increased funding from the legislature and M&O with the increase in classroom site fund and leftover ESSER money. And so I think it's important to note that we're not talking about that ESSER money. We know that that's temporary money, it's going away, and it's not something that should drive compensation base salary increases. I think there's a couple districts that are doing that, and frankly, I think that they're playing with fire when it comes to what those increases are going to look like through that. So I think those, and in terms of those other districts, I don't know what their ADMs look like and what those sorts of stabilities look like. In terms of the vacant positions, in terms of classroom positions, we have, I believe today, 11 vacant classroom positions. If we look at all certified, we're more like at 45, but that would include things like math interventionists, master teacher roles, ELL interventionists, and those positions, but actual classroom teacher roles. So in the analysis that, and the information we're going to bring to the study session, we will talk about which of those roles we want to continue to budget for, because we're still actively recruiting for them. We wouldn't want to take them out of the budget when we desperately need them. And I know that that's the case at several of our schools. As we look at other districts, what they may have done, every district has vacancies right now, and sizable numbers of vacancies. They may have started to freeze their vacancies for one reason or another. We want to be obviously much calmer with that. Our margins can get so thin given the nature of our tall, skinny schools. It doesn't create a whole lot of wiggle room. And people feel that every year, this time of year, as we start to look at how many kids showed up in third grade versus how many showed up in first grade. And just the tiniest move, given the tall skinniness of our schools, can totally skew a class size because there's no other class to put the kids in. So perhaps the construction of their schools gives them more margins that they can now use to hedge any bets against something like ADM. And then the last thing I think I would share, and I don't think it's something we know that they don't, but the AEL is still out there. We all know what that was like this spring, and there doesn't seem to be any indication that the AEL is a priority at the State House right now, even though they know that they've put it even more pressure on it with the increases that they approved. I think that was perhaps a tactic now that we have universal vouchers. I think that's another dynamic in this whole thing. We're all still yet to see what the actual effect of vouchers, universal vouchers are. I think AEDE today came out with information that they estimate 75% of universal vouchers will go to people who've never set foot in a public school. On the one hand, that was like a relief because that means we're not losing a ton of kids to private schools. On the other hand, though, that's only further showing the siphoning of public funds that are now going to be going to those private schools instead of to public schools. We're still yet then to see the impact of school choice once you're dangling those vouchers essentially in front of families.
Has there been any talk between administration and the board about potential, like ways to potentially increase our ADM, like expanding our school limits, busing kids in? Why are we losing these kids? Is it because they're not satisfied with the education they're getting? Like those kinds of conversations?
Yeah, great question, Ms. Honeman. Yes, I think for folks that have been watching governing board meetings for the last several years, it's a topic that's been at several different board meetings in terms of looking at expanding signature programs, better highlighting them in our marketing materials. I think if you look at, like our marketing for 150th celebration, you'll see just the efforts to really get the word out about our great programs. At the same time, at governing board meetings, multiple times, not so much in the past year and a half to 2 years, a lot of those meetings were dominated by COVID. But the district has commissioned demographic studies that showed that what is happening now was going to happen, that the enrollment would decrease below 5,000. I believe at one point they said before the year 2024. Well, here we are in 2022. It's a little early, but we've now look like we have reached that point. It's not a surprise in terms of where it's coming from. It's not clear in terms of what rate it is with each thing, but we do have increased competition. We know that, but we also have a lack of affordable housing in our downtown footprint. Families are moving out and they're not being replaced by their families. They're being replaced by gentrification. And that process of gentrification that's taking place throughout the downtown footprint is going to continue to make it very difficult for us as we just see less and less kids in our neighborhood. We'll have more information on this as the year goes on, but some of the data we provide every year is out of district enrollments. And what you'll actually see is, I think last year that number was as high as 40% in several of our schools. So 4 out of 10 of our kids are getting moved in from another part of the valley. We have kids that travel from all over the valley to come to our schools. We're at that point in the school year now where we're all sort of adjusting to what's happening this year. And so that data isn't super clean in any of our systems. As it becomes more and more clear, though, that will be information that will definitely get shared.
Thank you so much. I wanted to bring a couple more things into the room. I know that we're still in the early phases of talking this through, but something I think I would be remiss to not bring up if I didn't. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Sorry. This migraine is making speaking incredibly difficult. Something I feel I'd be remiss to not bring up is that PECTA doesn't just represent our certified classroom teachers. We represent a wide array of various staff with social workers, nurses, SLPs, and things like that. So when we are looking at possibilities for this money, whenever that is or whatever that looks like, I want to make sure that I am setting the precedent and that everyone else is setting the precedent, that we are open to any number of things, as long as, and this is personally from my vantage point, but I think I can speak for most people when I say this, we need to make sure that we are honoring the people who were not able to get that Prop 301 money. So our social workers, our nurses, our SLPs, we need to really, I think, prioritize ensuring that they are being compensated fairly. So I just wanted to bring that into the room. And then I also wanted to also say, I appreciated, Dr. Diaz, that you mentioned sustainability. and bring in to the room that PECTA's #1 stance in this. And we understand, you know, the classroom site fund is so amazing and we're so excited that there's extra money in it. But the last thing that we want, we will never say no, right? Everybody needs more money right now, always. But the last thing that we would want is to have another stipend. We would rather have something that is sustainable and is included in our base salaries, because we can count on that from year to year. So I just wanted to bring those two items into the room as we move forward in discussion.
No, thanks for that, Marnie. Let me sort of talk about each one. The first one, in proposal 4, I remember having this conversation this spring when we clarified this. The $1,500 proposal isn't just for certified teachers. It would be for anybody on the certified schedule, the resource specialist schedule, social workers, SLP, PT, OT, nurses, and psychologists. So when PECTA at the beginning of this meeting said the $1,500 proposal, I'm already including that in my mental thinking. So want to make sure that's all accurate. In terms of classroom site fund monies, just as a reminder to those employee groups, you are now receiving the base salary supplements that you are now eligible for. But also in the plan that the Prop 301 committee created, there is the possibility of several of those groups receiving performance-based pay in this school year. In terms of their performance from this school year, that would get paid out next school year. And so the classroom site committee, the Prop 301 committee, just hats off to them at all times as they've cracked open a lot of these flexibilities to bring in more of those groups. But the biggest group that's excluded from classroom site fund, of course, is our support staff. And so as we think about the presentation that'll be made on Tuesday, as we think about any additional monies, obviously that's going to be a group that's very important for us to continue to support. We're very happy and we're very proud that we brought the minimum wage up to $14 an hour, but we know there's still work to do and there's still room to grow there. So on the note of just other employee groups, we'll make sure that we keep all that in mind when we're building something that can be sustainable. In terms of the classroom site fund being a sustainable or not so sustainable source of funding and a stipend, totally understand that. I would say, though, one thing to keep in mind, there is one part of classroom site fund monies that certified staff receive that is a supplemental pay, but it's actually not a stipend. And that's the base salary supplement that you get. That was part of the original Prop 301 from the year 2000, that you don't have to jump through any PD hoops. You don't have to do any performance. You don't have to hold a certification. This is just added to your salary because your salary should be supplemented. Right now, that is set at $1,500 per educator. It was increased in 2019 from $1,000 to $1,500. That could be one of the things that the Prop 301 committee would look at. So there wouldn't be the introduction of a new PD plan or bigger retention stipends or bigger performance-based pay. There would be the opportunity to also look at that source of pay. It is sustainable and solid enough that you do see it on your contracts, which is very different from the vast majority of stipends that people receive. On your contract, and on the addendums that folks received last week. And again, thank you so much for your patience. I know how long it took for us to get those out, but on those addendums, you'll even see base salary supplement. So we do have that option as well through the classroom site fund.
And I believe I said this before, but I want to say it again, just in case. I don't know if anyone from ESPA is on this call, but I know that we're still building up our ESPA presence, and I am more than willing, even though PECTA is unable to at this time negotiate on behalf of ESPA, I am more than willing to help support in any way that we can, because PECTA wants that same thing as well. We want to see all staff, no matter at what level you're serving our students, because we all are educators, like every single one of us. We want to see everybody be able to, thrive and survive and stay here, because I truly believe we have the best employees of any district. So please pass along my information if I can help in any way, getting ESPA, back here and to the table with us, because, we want to support them. And then my last question that I have a couple, sorry. Dr. Diaz, we appreciate your due diligence. You've been following up on a lot of things. Are you open to maybe meeting with PECTA and Zooming responses to some of your research into what other districts are doing? in terms of this money. I'm trying to keep everyone as updated as possible. And I think it would be really beneficial if everyone could kind of see, well, okay, this is what this district is doing. And like you're saying, they're taking from the ESSER money. And I understand that we didn't want to do that as a district because that could come back to be something that we would then have to pay back. But I would like everyone to be sort of privy to the information that I get in terms of how other districts are doing this. And then could you maybe give us a brief update on the RFP process? Because I know that plays a role in this as well, and maybe like a timeline as far as you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of
A small order here.
yeah, no, in terms of maybe PECTA, yeah, just let me know when and where and what information I can share. In terms of the RFP process, that's in relation to the compensation analysis. Thank you for bringing that into this discussion too, as we think about sustainability and sort of going slow to go fast. We know that the compensation analysis is going to come with recommendations that are going to cost money in terms of bringing more parity internally and more competitiveness externally to all of the salaries in the district. Many thanks to the PECTA members who sat on the RFP committee. That was a new thing, I think, for Phoenix One, and a really exciting one, that we had that voice at the table in terms of looking at all the different vendors who proposed for this. Mr. Quintana, can you give us a sense? I think that where we are right now is that the RFP process has ended, and we're just about ready to select a vendor.
That's correct. So the feedback that I'm getting from Monique, our procurement manager, is that the group that's working on this RFP made a selection, and that selection will be presented at the September 20th board meeting, because next week is not technically our board meeting, so we want to take it to a meeting that they can actually take action on. So we're going to basically present the recommendation to for the selection of the firm that's going to be doing the compensation study. That will be made on the 20th, but the firm has been selected.
So in terms of a timeline, if that is approved by the governing board on the 20th, then that work would start very, very quickly. I think the timeline that the different vendors gave us ranged anywhere between 6 to 9 months. Actually, I think there was a vendor that actually proposed something that was in the 4 to 5 year range, but we definitely wanted to move a little faster than that. So we would definitely want to have an eye on that too in future meetings as we're thinking about that process, having recommendations as early as the spring.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that. I really do appreciate it. I think those are all of my questions. Wait, nope, sorry. I have one more, and it's kind of a tangential question, but I feel like to know me is to accept and expect those kinds of questions from me. But just to quickly go back to the 301 monies, you had said that this coming year that non-classroom certified staff could be eligible for that 301 money. But with now that, so the holdup in the past was that there was some issue, and I can't really speak to it because I wasn't on the committee, but there was some issue with their LOI, whatever their observation instrument was. So if they're eligible now this year, or they could be eligible, is the burden on those staff members to prove that they're being observed, or how is that going to be calculated?
Yeah. No, great question. Give me a moment. I'm going to see if I can actually bring up the plan, because it was approved by the board. So let me bring up the board approved version of it. But it does make reference to the different qualities, if you will, that determine whether or not somebody would be eligible for that pay. Okay, I just brought it up here. It was approved by the governing board on April the 20th of 2022. And it states, that there are two components related to your performance in this school year, 22-23, both an individual performance and a school-based performance. And there is different compensation for each of those. In terms of the people who are eligible for it, it states that for performance-based compensation, your job assignment must be in a school-based or student-focused position, evaluated using the following instruments that have been determined to be A, performance-based with multiple measures, B, inclusive of individual student achievement data or practice-related growth, C, equipped with rubrics that clearly demonstrate levels of performance, and D, focused on instructional improvement. And then it does list all those OIs, the LOI, the SPED overlay, the LDOI, the COI, or the MOI. What we made sure to do here was offer the flexibility to build new instruments as long as it meets those criteria. It will not be the responsibility of, let's say, an individual social worker to advocate for that. We would want to take care of that as a group. That as a social work group, we're building the evaluation instrument that we would need to that meets that criteria. Folks, today you received the presentation on the GPS, and the GPS primarily focuses on the LOI. Now that that's in place, we can turn more attention towards these other employee groups who can also be evaluated under these different types of instruments. So definitely more work here to be done in terms of the evaluation instrument for those groups. But it would create a situation where your performance in this year could be compensated in the, or you would get the compensation for it, I should say, in the 23-24 school year.
And then, so what needs to be done to ensure that that will happen this year?
Yeah, the heads of those departments and the human resources department, we need to collaborate to build that evaluation tool, make sure that the evaluation tool meets the criteria that was approved, and then build that instrument, not just the instrument, but the process, just like we saw with the GPS.
And whose responsibility is it to get that going?
For each employee group, it would be whoever the functional head of that group is. And then, like I said, that would be done in collaboration with the human resources department. So that'd be me and whoever the department head for that group would be.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I know that some work on that already started over the summer. Was one of the reasons we wanted to get this plan approved as early as we did. It was the first time in many years we approved a 301 plan the year before it took place. And part of the reason why was to get a head start on these different pieces. So like I said, teachers today, you learn more about the LOI, you learn more about the GPS. Those other employee groups can expect something similar in terms of their evaluation instruments and the impact those evaluations may have on performance-based compensation.
All right, Haley, do you have any more questions?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity for transparency and clarity, and I appreciate the opening of Meet and Confer, and it seems like we're on the same page about what our ask is, and the district's gonna do what they can to see what's possible. So thank you so much.
And then I just have one final question, which is what's next in terms of our timeline, our being the Meet and Confer team? And do we know yet when we can reconvene with a clearer ADM picture?
Yeah, great question. I think we need to see how the study session goes, what comes out of the study session, what the next steps are from there. So I would anticipate us being able to set our next meeting after the 6th, perhaps for during the week of the 6th. I would bet no later than the week of the 12th would be our next meeting. I think that in terms of your proposal, the ball is in our court. You know, you hit it over here. And so now the next meeting we'd be able to respond to that proposal, given where we are with the availability of budget.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, just as always, thank you for everything you all do. This has been a rocky start to our school year for just about everybody. As I said earlier, we're all moving 1,000,000 miles an hour in 30 different directions. But you know, from top to bottom, everybody's commitment to kids, to families, to community. I've never felt it stronger when I'm visiting campuses, when I'm in classrooms, or at the office hours that we're doing for HR right now. But we know that with that commitment also comes a lot of stress, and it comes, you know, a lot of pressure. So we really just appreciate having these kinds of spaces where we can discuss these things, we can get up to speed, we can get on the same page with one another. But you know, for my perspective in HR, we're always a phone call away or an email away. Definitely reach out if there's anything that we can do or anything that we can clarify. In terms of other things for people to have on the radar, performance pay, early October. Thank you for everybody who was able to get into the RDSS window and acknowledge your score. There's some people who weren't able to because they've changed positions and for some reason that kicked them out of RDSS. We were fixing that right before this meeting. So don't worry, if you weren't able to get into RDSS, you're going to be able to get in, acknowledge your score. We'll still be on path to get that paid sometime in early October.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. With that, I think I'll go ahead and end the meeting. Do we have any deliverables though before I close out? Is there anything? I know that Mr. Quintana, I said that I would get to you where the 2.9 number comes from. So I will get that to you hopefully this evening, but if not, by the end of this week for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Anything else?
I think that's all.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.